In the heart of the Roman Empire lived a man whose name would be immortalized by a decision that echoes through the ages. Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of the province of Judea, is a figure shrouded in controversy and mystery. Today, we'll explore not just the man, but the turbulent circumstances that shaped his fate. Pilate took over the governance of Judea during a period of tensions and messianic expectations. His administration, often marked by decisions that inflamed local sentiments, faced the constant challenge of balancing Roman authority with Jewish traditions and sensitivities. However, it was his encounter with a Galilean carpenter that would define his legacy. Jesus of Nazareth, an itinerant preacher, was brought before Pilate accused of subversion and blasphemy. The choice that followed, between justice and political expediency, was not just a personal dilemma for Pilate, but a moment that would alter the course of history. The decision to wash his hands, a symbolic gesture of renouncing responsibility, became one of the most infamous and debated acts in biblical narrative. This video explores the life and legacy of Pontius Pilate, unraveling the threads of his story to better understand the man behind the myth and the choices that shaped the faith of billions and his tragic history. In the whirlwind of events that marked the Roman occupation of Judea, no moment was as decisive as the trial of Jesus of Nazareth. Roman governor Pontius Pilate, though accustomed to dealing with disputes and rebellions, found himself in a unique dilemma that would test not only his administrative skills but also his morality and understanding of justice. The situation in Jerusalem was volatile. The city was filled with pilgrims for the Passover celebration, a time when messianic hopes and nationalist sentiments often ran high. Against this backdrop, Jesus was brought before Pilate after being captured and accused by Jewish religious leaders of various crimes, including blasphemy and inciting rebellion against Roman authority. The religious leaders, unable to carry out the death penalty without Roman approval, presented Jesus to Pilate as a challenger to Rome's power, someone who claimed to be the king of the Jews. This accusation was delicate, as any claim to kingship was a direct threat to the emperor. Pilate, aware of the power games at play, began his inquiry with a direct question to Jesus, seeking to understand his intentions and assess his threat to the empire. Jesus' enigmatic response that his kingdom is not of this world did not provide Pilate with the clarity he expected. This response not only puzzled Pilate but also placed him in a more difficult position, as it was ambiguous enough to avoid a direct charge of sedition, yet profound enough to suggest a challenge to the established order. With the crowd growing outside and the religious leaders pressing for a decision, Pilate tried a series of maneuvers to avoid condemning Jesus. His wife, influenced by a disturbing dream, also warned him to have nothing to do with that righteous man, adding a personal and mystical layer to his dilemma. Pilate's attempt to use the Passover tradition of releasing a prisoner to save Jesus was a miscalculated move. He presented Barabbas and Jesus to the people, hoping they would choose to release the less dangerous man. However, the priests manipulated the crowd into choosing Barabbas, and Pilate found himself forced to deal with an unexpected outcome. The pressure from the crowd, the manipulation by the religious leaders, and his wife's warning created an internal conflict in Pilate that culminated in his decision to wash his hands in a symbolic act of renouncing responsibility. This gesture, meant to preserve his conscience, was in vain, as the decision to crucify Jesus had already been made. The crucifixion, one of the most brutal and public forms of execution, was a clear signal that Roman authority still prevailed, despite the complex moral and political issues at stake. The story of Jesus' trial is not just a tale of religious or legal conflicts. It is a narrative about the complexities of power, justice, and human destiny. Pilate, a Roman administrator caught between his duty to the empire and his emerging understanding of justice, made a choice that would resonate through history, marking him as a symbol of moral and institutional failure. This story, deeply rooted in Christian tradition and historical discussions, challenges us to reflect on the nature of justice and the responsibility of those in power. As we contemplate the trial of Jesus by Pilate, we are invited to consider not only the historical facts but also the moral questions they represent. This episode is not just a turning point in the biblical narrative, but also a mirror of the struggles and choices we face in our own lives. Pontius Pilate's decision to condemn Jesus to crucifixion is a cornerstone in the history of Christianity and a turning point that has echoed through the ages, influencing not only the course of religion but also that of Western civilizations. At the heart of this decision lie the complexities of power, the ethics of governance, and the psychology of a man under intense political and moral pressure. When Pilate confronted Jesus, he found himself at a crossroads of conflicting loyalties. On one hand, the evidence of a real uprising was tenuous. On the other, the pressure from Jewish religious leaders and the crowd gathered outside the Praetorium demanded a response that would affirm Roman authority: crucifixion, a sentence reserved for the worst criminals and rebels against the state, was a demonstration of power and a warning to anyone who might challenge the empire. The immediate impact of the decision was palpable. The crowd, having clamored for Jesus' death, dispersed, satisfied with a display of Roman justice. For the religious leaders, Jesus' execution represented the elimination of a threat to their power and authority. However, what seemed like a closure unfolded into a series of events that would turn Pilate into a tragic and controversial figure. The repercussions of Jesus' crucifixion went far beyond the temporary quelling of tensions in Jerusalem. The event planted the seeds of what would become a sweeping spiritual and social transformation. In the days and weeks that followed, reports of miracles and news of Jesus' resurrection began to spread, challenging the official narrative and casting doubt on the legitimacy of Pilate's decision. These developments not only undermined Roman authority, but also provoked a deeper reflection on the nature of justice and power. For Pilate, the consequences of his decision were both immediate and long-lasting. His name, already associated with hesitation and compromise, became a symbol of injustice and betrayal in the emerging Christian tradition. Pilate's figure in Christian history is often discussed with shades of treachery and cowardice. A man who, though possessing the power to do what was right, chose the path of political convenience. Psychologically, Pilate may have been deeply affected by his interaction with Jesus and the turbulent circumstances of the trial. The pressure from Jewish leaders, the frenzied crowd, and even his wife's disturbing warning all contributed to an atmosphere of intense emotional anguish. The image of washing his hands, though symbolic, reflected a deep desire to dissociate himself from a morally compromising decision. However, this action did not relieve the weight of guilt or responsibility. Rather, it perpetuated his image as a leader who failed at crucial moments. The political implications of Pilate's decision were also significant. While it initially seemed that he had secured order and reaffirmed Roman authority, the growing spread of Christianity and the veneration of Jesus as a martyr challenged the narrative of control and power. This shift not only affected Pilate's personal legacy, but also illustrated the complex interplay between imperial power and local religious beliefs. In retrospect, Pilate's decision to crucify Jesus highlights the complexity of choices made by leaders under pressure. Pilate's case serves as a study on the difficulty of governing justly in an environment of intense religious and political conflicts. His legacy, filled with varied interpretations, is a reminder that actions taken on the world stage can have repercussions that transcend the immediate and shape the course of history in unexpected ways. Pilate's story, often seen in a negative light, also offers room for more nuanced reflections on the nature of leadership and ethical responsibility. He has become a central figure in many theological and philosophical discussions about free will, predestination, and the morality of actions under duress. His story invites us to explore the depths of the human condition, facing dilemmas that still resonate in the corridors of power and contemporary ethical debates. This detailed examination of the consequences of Pilate's decision reveals how one moment can reverberate through the centuries, influencing not only those directly involved but also future generations. As we contemplate his story, we are invited to ponder our own choices and the ripples they create in the vast ocean of human history. The fall of Pontius Pilate is a story of political intrigue, religious conflict, and the inevitable repercussions of decisions made under pressure. After the crucifixion of Jesus, Pilate, who initially seemed to have averted an imminent crisis, began to face the shockwaves his act unleashed. His downfall was marked by a series of events and choices that illustrate the fragility of power in a turbulent province like Judea. Following the crucifixion, Pilate attempted to continue his administration in Judea, but the situation was already beyond his control. News of Jesus' resurrection spread quickly, creating a wave of conversions and strengthening the nascent Christian movement. For the Romans, any movement growing outside state control represented a potential threat. Pilate found himself again in an uncomfortable position, where pacifying the province and maintaining order required measures that often exacerbated tensions. Historical and traditional accounts indicate that Pilate, already unpopular for his severe administration and disrespect for Jewish sensibilities, faced increasing opposition from both the local population and his own superiors. One notable controversy was the use of temple funds to build an aqueduct, a decision that provoked a strong reaction from the Jews, culminating in violent protests. Pilate's brutal response, ordering his soldiers to mix with the protesters and attack them, only intensified the resentment. Pilate's problems were not limited to popular revolts. His relationship with the Jewish religious leaders remained tense. Dissatisfied with his management and acts of provocation, they began sending complaints to Emperor Tiberius. These complaints, which included accusations of corruption, abuse of power, and incompetence, gained traction in Rome. Pilate, aware of the growing dissatisfaction, tried to suppress the spread of Christianity, but his efforts only increased the perception that he could not control the situation. The final straw for Pilate came with the massacre of Samaritans on Mount Gerizim. The Samaritans, following a leader who claimed to know the location of sacred vessels hidden by Moses, gathered in large numbers. Fearing an insurrection, Pilate ordered his troops to intervene, resulting in a bloodbath. This incident provided the opportunity Pilate's enemies in Rome were waiting for. The complaints about his administration culminated in an order for him to return to Rome and face an investigation. In Rome, Pilate faced a series of accusations that put his career and life at risk. He was met not with indifference, but with latent hostility. Tiberius, already irritated by the constant tensions in Judea, showed no sympathy for his governor. Pilate, who once held great power and authority, now found himself vulnerable. Exposed to the machinations of his political enemies, the investigation in Rome was rigorous. Pilate was accused of mismanagement, cultural insensitivity, and exacerbating tensions in Judea instead of pacifying them. His defense, based on the complexity of governing such a volatile province, was not enough to avoid his downfall. Pilate's fall was swift and decisive. He was removed from office and condemned to exile. Some historical accounts suggest he retired to Gaul, where he lived out his days in obscurity and shame. For Pilate, exile was a devastating blow. He, who had been a representative of imperial power, now found himself without resources and without the protection of the title that once conferred prestige and security. The weight of the decisions he made in Judea, especially the crucifixion of Jesus, continued to haunt him. Traditionally, it is believed that Pilate never freed himself from the guilt associated with condemning a man many considered innocent and divine. Christian and apocryphal traditions paint an even darker picture of Pilate's life after his fall. Some accounts suggest he was tormented by nightmares and visions, repeatedly reliving the trial of Jesus and his hand-washing gesture. In some traditions, including the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, it is suggested that Pilate eventually converted to Christianity in search of redemption. Other accounts speak of a man consumed by guilt and shame who committed suicide. The death of Pilate, shrouded in mystery, is reflected in various traditions. Eusebius of Caesarea, a 4th-century church historian, mentions that Pilate committed suicide under the reign of Caligula. This version, though not universally accepted, offers a tragic view of the end of a man whose actions had such a profound impact on history. The narrative of Pilate's suicide is often seen as a symbol of his final despair, an expression of remorse for his actions in Judea. Pilate's legacy is complex. He is frequently portrayed as a tragic and flawed figure, a man who, despite his position of power, was unable to act with true justice. His story is a reminder of the challenges and responsibilities that come with power and the consequences of yielding to political and social pressure at the expense of moral integrity. Pilate's figure serves as a lasting example of the dangers of moral weakness and the need for courage in the face of difficult decisions. Even after his death, Pilate's memory continued to be evoked in discussions about justice, responsibility, and leadership. His figure appears in sermons, works of art, and literature, reflecting the lessons his story offers. Pilate's fall is not just the story of a governor who lost his position, but a study of human failings and the repercussions of decisions made under coercion. His life and fall are a testament to the complexity of the human condition and an invitation to reflect on our own choices and responsibilities. The fall of Pilate is a narrative rich in historical details and moral implications. It offers us insight into the nature of power, ethical responsibility, and the consequences of actions taken in times of crisis. Through his story, we are reminded that power is not just a matter of authority but also of moral responsibility, and that choices made in the heat of the moment can have lasting and profound repercussions. Pilate's story, marked by his rise to power and subsequent fall, is a reflection of the complex interaction between the individual and social and political forces. His trajectory is a mirror of the difficulties faced by those in leadership positions and a warning about the importance of maintaining integrity and justice, even when confronted with immense pressures. The fall of Pilate, therefore, remains a timeless study of the struggles and dilemmas that define the human experience. The final fate of Pontius Pilate is shrouded in mystery and speculation, with various historical narratives and religious traditions offering different perspectives on his last years and the conclusion of his life. After his dismissal and exile, Pilate disappeared from official chronicles, leaving space for myths and legends to fill the gaps in his story. Marked by the infamy of his decision to crucify Jesus, Pilate's figure became a symbol of guilt, repentance, and, in some traditions, the quest for redemption. After being called back to Rome to face charges of mismanagement and abuse of power, Pilate underwent a rigorous investigation. The loss of his position and his subsequent exile were inevitable results of political pressure and dissatisfaction from both Roman authorities and the Jewish population. This exile is often described as a period of great personal anguish for Pilate. Stripped of the power he once wielded and the comforts of his position, he found himself isolated and consumed by guilt. One of the most persistent versions of Pilate's fate is that he eventually committed suicide. This narrative is supported by sources such as Eusebius of Caesarea, a 4th-century church historian, who mentioned that Pilate took his own life under the reign of Caligula. According to Eusebius, Pilate could not bear the weight of his actions and the humiliation of his exile, opting to end his life. This account of suicide is often interpreted as a final act of despair and remorse, an attempt to escape the psychological and spiritual consequences of his decisions. However, Eusebius' account is not the only one. Other apocryphal texts and traditions present different versions of Pilate's end. Some of these narratives suggest that he spent his last days in penitence, seeking redemption for the sins he committed during his governance. Notably, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church holds a unique tradition that views Pilate more compassionately. According to this tradition, Pilate eventually converted to Christianity, acknowledging his guilt in Jesus' crucifixion and seeking forgiveness. The idea that Pilate might have converted to Christianity is a fascinating theme. This narrative paints a picture of a man seeking redemption, grappling with the weight of his past actions, and striving for spiritual peace. If true, this conversion would symbolize a profound transformation, a journey from remorse to the pursuit of absolution. For many Christians, this story of redemption is a powerful testament to divine mercy and forgiveness. On the other hand, the Catholic tradition is less inclined to offer a redemptive view of Pilate. He is often remembered as the archetype of a weak and manipulable ruler, whose indecision and lack of moral courage led to the death of an innocent man. In the Gospels and Christian liturgies, Pilate is presented as an example of human failure in the face of truth and justice. His figure is used pedagogically to illustrate the dangers of succumbing to external pressure and failing to act according to one's conscience. Beyond Christian traditions, there are also secular accounts of Pilate's fate. Tacitus, the Roman historian, although not providing specific details about his death, describes Pilate as an administrator whose actions frequently provoked the anger of both the Jews and the Roman authorities. This description corroborates the image of a ruler whose career was marked by controversies and conflicts, leading to an ignominious and premature end. Another legend that developed over the centuries is the Golden Legend, a collection of medieval hagiographies. According to this legend, after being exiled to Gaul, Pilate committed suicide and his body was thrown into a river, where it remained as a symbol of eternal curse and remorse. This narrative, although lacking solid historical basis, reflects the popular perception of Pilate as a tragic figure whose actions had lasting and terrible consequences. Regardless of the accuracy of these versions, they all share a common theme: Pilate's search for redemption, or at least for understanding and relief from the weight of his guilt. Pilate's figure continues to be evoked in theological and philosophical discussions as an example of moral dilemmas and the consequences of human actions. His story serves as a reminder of the complexity of human nature and the constant struggle between good and evil within each individual. The absence of a definitive conclusion about Pilate's fate also leads us to reflect on how history and tradition deal with controversial figures. The different versions of his death and the speculation about his possible redemption or eternal condemnation highlight the difficulty of separating fact from fiction when it comes to such complex and impactful historical characters. This ambiguity allows Pilate to continue to be a reference point for reflection on issues of justice, responsibility, and forgiveness. Pilate's final fate is, therefore, a multifaceted narrative that goes beyond historical events and enters the realm of morality and spirituality. His life and actions challenge us to consider the implications of our own decisions and to ponder the ways in which we seek redemption or face our guilt. Pilate, in his fall and possible repentance, offers us a mirror of the human condition, reflecting our own struggles with power, morality, and the search for deeper meaning in our lives. Ultimately, Pilate's story cannot be contained in a single narrative or conclusion. It is a complex set of actions, consequences, and interpretations that continue to resonate today. Whether seen as a symbol of moral weakness or as an example of the search for redemption, Pilate's figure remains relevant in discussions about ethics, leadership, and the nature of repentance. His story is an invitation to explore our own journeys of self-discovery and moral growth, reminding us that the actions of each individual have the power to shape the course of history in profound and unexpected ways. Thus, the final fate of Pontius Pilate is an ongoing chapter in the story of humanity, echoing through generations as an example of how the challenges of leadership and moral responsibility can define not just the life of an individual, but also the legacy they leave for the world. The complexity of his figure and the variety of interpretations about his end remind us of the importance of facing our decisions with integrity and courage, always seeking the path of justice and truth, even when this path is the hardest to follow. The story of Pontius Pilate, marked by the decision to condemn Jesus to crucifixion, stands as a pivotal moment in Christian history and a profound study of power, morality, and justice. As the governor of Judea, Pilate operated within a context of intense cultural and political tensions, where his actions often sparked controversy. His attempt to maintain order by condemning Jesus reveals the dilemma of a leader caught between loyalty to the Roman Empire and his perception of justice. The decision to crucify Jesus was an act of political pragmatism but morally flawed. Pilate recognized Jesus' innocence but succumbed to the pressure of the crowd and religious leaders. The gesture of washing his hands, an attempt to absolve himself of guilt, failed to redeem his image. Instead, it solidified his figure as a symbol of moral weakness. The consequences of this decision were profound. Jesus was crucified, and his death became the foundation of the Christian faith. For Pilate, the crucifixion marked the beginning of his downfall. His severe actions, such as the massacre of Samaritans on Mount Gerizim, exacerbated his unpopularity, leading to his dismissal and exile in Rome. Pilate faced a rigorous investigation. Stripped of his position and exiled, his later life is shrouded in mystery, with accounts ranging from suicide to conversion to Christianity. Regardless of the exact end, It is clear that Pilate spent his last days burdened by the decisions he made. Pilate's legacy is a study in leadership and moral responsibility. He is remembered as a symbol of failure to act justly. His story offers a reflection on the nature of power and the quest for redemption. Pilate serves as a reminder that the actions of leaders have profound impacts not only on their own lives but also on the lives of those they govern. The figure of Pilate continues to be relevant in theological, philosophical, and cultural discussions, challenging us to consider the importance of acting with integrity and courage. His story reminds us that the pursuit of justice is a continuous challenge. In his weakness and search for redemption, Pilate reflects our own struggles with power and morality, offering valuable lessons on leadership and responsibility. As we contemplate Pilate's story, we are inspired to act with integrity and courage, always seeking justice. His life is a testimony to the struggles and challenges of the human experience, an invitation to explore the depths of the human condition and seek truth in our own lives. Pilate reminds us that power demands moral responsibility and that our choices can have lasting repercussions. If you found this story impactful and want to continue learning about important figures and events in the Bible, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your participation is essential for us to continue bringing content that inspires and strengthens faith. Now, I want to make a special invitation. If you have not yet accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior, this is the perfect opportunity. God has a wonderful plan for your life, and by accepting Jesus, you open your heart to a deep and transformative love. Let Jesus guide your steps and transform your life with His grace and mercy. If you have already made this decision, share your testimony in the comments. Tell us how God's love has impacted your life and how you have seen His plans come to fruition in your journey. Let's create a community of faith where we can encourage and strengthen one another through Christ's love. May God abundantly bless your life, and may you feel His presence in your heart more and more. See you in the next video.